It's an absolute mess, given what we've been hearing from this latest report from the Health Committee, cross-party committee. What has Boris Johnson done during his tenure to try to ease the problems in the National Health Service?
Well, we've been going through a record number of recruitment processes for doctors, for nurses, also for other public servants like police officers, for example. But of course, what we are seeing is that the inflationary pressures which are affecting all of us are particularly affecting those people in public service. That's why it's so important that whoever steps in as Prime Minister next, and I hope that it is Liz, will get a grip of inflation, start driving down inflation so that people can keep more of the money that they can earn, more people can feel comfortable staying in the NHS, and that we can address both the external pressures that are affecting the NHS, like inflation, but also some of the long-term demographic changes which are increasing pressure as well.
Yeah, but money's no good to you if you're sick and there isn't a doctor to look after you. I was speaking to Jeremy Hunt in the last hour and he was suggesting that we should ease border controls for some doctors and other healthcare workers to get them into the UK until we've trained those that we need.
Well, we have always relied... My mother was a midwife. She came from Sierra Leone. So we've always relied on medical professionals from overseas. That's not going to change. And actually, part of leaving the European Union and having a much greater control over our own immigration policy is that we can adjust immigration to make sure that we have the right mix of people, high-skilled people like medical professionals, whether they be doctors or nurses or other specialist roles. And we are doing that.
Are we?
We are. We also have to make sure we train British people to go into those medical professions as well.
Yeah. I'm talking about borders. What on earth is happening down at the ports? Whose fault is that?
Well, I think Liz was absolutely right when she said that the pressures ultimately can only be resolved on the French side. It seems that they don't have enough people on to man the checks. We have always had border checks. Anyone that's crossed into France will know that we've always had checks at the border. We're not part of the Schengen area, so...
Yeah, but they've been waved through, most people, with the odd passport being checked. That's not the case anymore.
And there's every reason that that could continue, because, as I say, we've not been part of the Schengen area, so we've never been part of the passport-free European area. So there have always been checks. The fact that they are taking so much longer now is causing these problems. That can and should be resolved. Liz has been speaking with her opposite number in France about this very issue. I know Grant Shapps has been speaking with his opposite number in the transport department in France. So we are working to get this resolved. But ultimately, this is something that we do need the French authorities to increase the number of people doing those checks.
So is it the fault of the French?
Well, what I want to do is look to resolve this issue. Well, I say what I want to. I'm no longer Europe Minister, I'm Education Secretary. But ultimately, I think the priority is to get this resolved and to make sure that we don't do anything to make it worse. And I think the best way of doing that is to work with our French counterparts rather than getting into a kind of blame.
Spending 21 hours in the car with the kids with, only a small bottle of water, is that taking back control?
Well, as I say, we have always had checks at the border. So you're implying this is a Brexit-related issue?
We've had checks where you get waved through and every now and seldom they would check a passport. Now, of course, we're not part of the European Union anymore, and as a result, they're checking every passport.
Hang on. That's a non sequitur.
If you haven't been through that border, you will... Have you ever driven through that border?
Of course, loads
so
of
you
times,
know that you've gone through without your passport being checked.
But we have never been part of the Schengen area. There has always been the necessity for border checks. How those checks are done should and could be pragmatic, because we are no greater risk now than we were when we were a member state of the European Union prior to 2019. So I would...
French are entitled to protect their borders as much as we are.
And as I say, and we are not suddenly a greater risk than we were when we were a member state of the EU.
OK. Talk to me about Liz Truss, your candidate's suggestion that she would scrap the increase in national insurance straight away. That would lose £12 billion that has been earmarked for social care and the NHS. that would be scrapped. What impact would that have on staffing and waiting lists in the NHS and also for social care?
So what Liz has said is that we need to go for a economic growth strategy, and increasing the tax burden on businesses, which are inevitably going to be passed on to consumers, is not the way of doing that. We are already highly taxed as a society, and I think when there are inflationary pressures, when prices are going up, what we need to do is to make sure we reduce the bit of people's expenditure that we are in direct control of, and that is tax. So it's absolutely right that we allow people to keep more of the money they have earned. That money will help them meet the increasing bills that we are all seeing. That's absolutely the right thing to do. It will also give an economic boost, and she's also gone on to explain how we'd have these light regulatory zones to boost regional economic growth across the UK. That's how you do it, by getting more money overall in the economy. It means that the individual pressure on families is reduced, but there's also plenty of money coming into the Exchequer to pay for those public services like the NHS that we've just discussed.
How much respect do you have for the Office of Budget Responsibility?
Well, of course we listen to it. Of course we listen to it. But ultimately,
it's madness.
But ultimately, it's the decision of politicians which are then implemented by officials. It shouldn't be the other way around. It should not be officials telling politicians what they should and should not do policy-wise. And the simple fact is, you look around the international...
They're not doing that. They're just offering guidance and advice.
If you look around the other major economies like ourselves, nobody else is going for a taxation level that we are at the moment. So, of course, tax income is important. That's what pays for those public services. But the best way of maximising the amount of money you can spend on public services is maximising the growth in the economy. And that's what Liz has said she's planning to do.
How much respect do you have for the economist Patrick Minford, who your candidate has mentioned a couple of times, hasn't she?
Yes, she has.
OK.
She has.
Do you have respect for him?
Yeah, of course. He is a well-respected economist. But like all economists, he gives advice. Yeah. But ultimately, it comes back to the same point, whether it's from officials, whether it's from economists. They give their ideas, they give their advice, but ultimately it's for politicians to make the decisions on this. He
would see an interest rate of something like 7%. What sort of impact would that have on people's mortgages?
Well, with the, we're seeing globally these inflationary pressures. This is a global phenomenon.
Doesn't help people in Wall's End who can't pay their mortgage.
And we are seeing in many parts of the world that interest rates are nudging upwards. Now, we have had a very, very, very long period of very, very low interest rates. Now, for the last best part of 10 years, it's been close to zero interest rates. It was always... it was never going to be possible to keep them that low indefinitely.
Would 7% be acceptable?
Well, look, ultimately, we want to keep interest rates modest. We want to make sure that savers... Well, look, I'm not an economist, but ultimately, a big jump in interest rates will hit people who are already finding bills difficult, and that's not what we want to see. But ultimately, what we need to do is make sure that we have that economic boost. And again, it keeps coming back to the same point, that the way sustainably you address these pressures that we're seeing from the fuel price increases, food increases, in part because of the invasion of Ukraine, is to make sure we get increased level of economic activity. That's the point that Liz has put across.
So 7% acceptable?
That's not what I've said.
No, I'm asking you.
Well, of course we wouldn't want to see 7% interest
5%?
rates. Look, I'm not going to start.
This is the sort of thing that Conservative grassroots people want to know, voters want to know before they put their X on the box.
There is no.
They want to know what they're voting for.
Prime Minister that can absolutely cast iron guarantee what interest rates will be in the future.
They know that it will go up, though, if you have tax decreases. Interest rates will have to go up.
Well, the point is that tax decreases will stimulate economic growth. That has got to be the foundation stone.
Only if you earn enough to pay tax.
That is what is going to be the foundation stone of any other economic policy. It's got to be growth first. If your economy isn't growing, everything else you might want to discuss is about how you mitigate bad news. A growing economy gives you the opportunities for good news. A shrinking economy is only bad news. That's why Liz is going for a growth strategy.
Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Tory party members want Boris Johnson back. Should he get a senior role in government?
Well,
Would you support that?
Well, I'm not the one running for the leadership.
I know.
So Boris, I've worked with him for years. You know, I supported him. I continue to regard him as an incredible, effective politician.
So he should have a role in government.
It's not for me to start suggesting.
You wouldn't be discontent if he was in government.
Well, look, he's an incredibly talented politician. Whether he would want to serve after the bruising that he's got at the moment, that might be another matter. But it's not for me to start dictating to Liz who she puts into her cabinet.
But you would welcome him if he did come back?
Well, I'd be comfortable if she is.
OK. Just before we let you go, how's your missus doing?
She's doing well. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you, and I do genuinely appreciate the support that you give and a lot of other people give. She's heading in the right direction. These hot nights are not always the most comfortable when you're recovering from surgery, but the prognosis is positive and the doctors are happy.
Oh, well, we send her much love. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.